Does the protagonist, antagonist, love interest have to be the main character? My name is Gina. I'm an author, editor, publishing professional. I help you make your writing better. No, they don't. So oftentimes, the protagonist is the main character, is the hero of the story. In fact, that is so common for that one character to be all three of those things that a lot of people think those terms are interchangeable. But the protagonist is the person who changes over the course of the story. So they will be the one who has the emotional arc, who has the character arc across the story. So they will change and be different than they were at the end from what they were at the beginning. And this can be that they have changed fundamentally and they are opposite of what they were at the beginning, or this can be that they are sort of different, but not really. They're more like a mirror of who they were. For example, Scarlett O'Hara goes from being a woman who thinks that marriage is a game and that all she wants in life is to be married to a very specific person, but she wants to be married so badly that when that person she loves gets married to someone else, she just marries literally the next guy who asks her. And then the next guy who asks her after that. She gets married over and over again because she thinks being married is the most important thing in the world, and she doesn't even really super care who it is to if it can't be to the person she loves. By the end of the story, she is single and self-reliant for the first time in her life and is looking forward and saying, you know what, I can do this, I can handle this. Simba starts the story by saying he just can't wait to be king because he's going to be in charge of everybody and he's going to boss everybody around. He can go wherever he wants and do whatever he wants. And by the end of the story, he is king. So he is not in a fundamentally different place than he thought he was going to be, except he has now learned that leadership is really more about serving the people that you are leading. It's not about being the boss of everybody, because it turns out being the boss of everybody is really super bad for the rest of the group. So he is a mirror of himself, in which Scarlett O'Hara was sort of the opposite, and Simba is a mirror. He got exactly what he wanted, but not in the way that he thought it was going to be. Tony Stark is an opposite. He starts by posing as the savior of the world, like putting his arms out and posing like Jesus Christ on the cross while bombs go off and demonstrate his power to kill behind him. And at the end of his story, he is now the actual literal savior of mankind, in which he brings everybody back to life. He undoes all of the damage. He is the savior, the unsung hero here at the end. So we have an opposite. He goes from posing and pretending but really being a merchant of death to being a person who saves countless lives by sacrificing his own. So that's a protagonist, the person who changes over the course of the story. The hero is the person who saves the day, and you can think of just literal countless examples of this. And again, you're also going to think of many, 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 many examples in which the hero and the protagonist are the same person. They are the same character, and they are almost always going to be the main character. You can look at somebody like Tony Stark, in which he is one of many in a very large ensemble over the course of, 21 or 22 movies or whatever it was that they got to from the first one to the end there. So is he the main character? I don't know. You can argue about that separately, but there are definitely a lot of really important characters in that story. But oftentimes that one character is going to be all three of those things: a main character, a protagonist, and the hero. But they don't have to all be the same person. One of my favorite stories to talk about in this regard is Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. Jack Sparrow, definitely the main character. He is the person that you thought of first if I say Pirates of the Caribbean, or if I say Curse of the Black Pearl. Jack Sparrow is the person that you think of. He is the most charismatic, he is the most interesting, he is the most fun to watch. He is also the person whose desires are sort of like what move us through the story. His pursuit of the Black Pearl is what we are all kind of rooting for overall. Yeah, there's some other things that we are also rooting for. This is a very complex plot with a lot of twisty, intertwining bits to it, but Jack is really sort of like the main driver of this one specific storyline. He is the one that you thought of first. He is the one who is most fun and most interesting. He is the takeaway from the story. But Elizabeth is the hero. She is the one who makes actual choices on screen and pushes the narrative forward. She is the one who lies about who she is in order to get herself out on that pirate ship. She is the one who gets them rescued off of the desert island. Jack doesn't do that. Jack kind of flounders around and keeps like winning by luck. Elizabeth is the one who makes actual active choices and helps push the narrative forward. And before somebody jumps into my comments, because every time I talk about this movie, people are like, Jack is only a pirate because he did that wasn't in the first movie, and you know it. When you watched this first movie, Jack was a pirate. He was a bad guy. You were rooting for a pirate. You didn't learn any of the rest of that until they retconned it in one of the novelizations or something later on. This is a pirate. This is not the hero of the story. You didn't know any of that backstory. That's all a retcon. Don't come in here with that. But then Will is the protagonist. He's the one who actually changes over the course of the story. He starts off wanting to rise above his station. Elizabeth is fundamentally the same person at the beginning as she is at the end. She was always super obsessed with pirates. She was in love with Will. She doesn't care what her father thinks. She doesn't care what all of the rest of the men around her think. Jack, fundamentally the same. Rogue pirate, wants to have his ship back. That's all that he cares about in life. Will wants to rise above his station. He believes in truth, justice, and the imperialist way, I guess. Here, he is indignant that a pirate would cheat in a sword fight, absolutely flabbergasted that someone would cheat in something as honorable as a sword fight. He doesn't even call her Elizabeth. He always calls her Miss Swan. He is really, really into the rules of propriety and protocol until he's not. So by the end of the movie, he is the one who has learned that there are things or people who are worth lying, cheating, stealing, and fighting for. He employs pirate tactics in order to help set Jack free at the end of the story. With the help from Elizabeth, her quick thinking is what makes it possible for them to rescue Jack at the end. But if we go back to the original question, say, does the protagonist, antagonist, or love interest have to be the main character? No, they don't have to be the main character. Oftentimes they are going to be, and if you are going to choose to have somebody other than those characters be the main character, you're going to have to still have a protagonist. You still are going to need an antagonist. You don't always need a love interest. That's not required. Not every single story must have a romance to it, but you definitely need somebody who the audience is rooting for. Even if this is an anti-hero or a morally gray character, they don't necessarily have to be good to be the protagonist. In fact, there are lots of examples of characters who are fundamentally bad and flawed and that we would never want to root for in real life, but we root for them in their stories. And then a main character is a really nebulous term. This is just sort of the person that you latch onto, that you think of when you think of that story. And so you will have a main character by default, even if you do not specifically set out to have one, your audience is going to latch onto one.